Let's talk about parking. Parking is probably something that the average North American driver doesn't really think much about. After all, the US and Canada has an abundance of large parking lots with free parking for pretty much anybody who has a car. But that's because North America was primarily designed for the car and around the car. And in places like the Netherlands and other European cities and countries, car parking works a lot differently. And that's because these places were designed before the car and have limited space. So today I want to talk a little bit about car parking in the Netherlands and places like the Netherlands where cars are not necessarily prioritized and free parking isn't necessarily abundantly available. So let's jump right into it. So yes, I'm standing in a massive parking lot right now, and I'm just outside of the city of Amsterdam. And this is one of the rare places in the Netherlands where you have a giant parking lot, a car-oriented area. It's a shopping center and it's kind of in the middle of nowhere, so the easiest way to get here and the quickest way to get here is by car. So there is an abundance of car parking, and of course it's to entice people to come here and shop. Now this is a bit of an anomaly though. I don't really see so many parking lots like this in the Netherlands, but this is a nice place to come to just do a bunch of shopping and easily take stuff to your cars. But huge parking lots like this are pretty rare across the Netherlands. So I know I'm making some generalizations. The Netherlands doesn't represent everywhere in Europe, and in places like Germany and France where there's more of an automotive lobby, the situation might be a little bit different. But generally speaking, European cities were designed before the car, well before the car, where walkability and public transport were more important than the car itself. Cars only came along later on, and they became more of a luxury item for those who could afford it. So car parking came along later and wasn't necessarily prioritized in terms of space utilization in places like European cities and even European suburbs. I'm here in one now, and the primary focus is on density and residential area, so having places for people to live. Cars take up a lot of space, there's no doubt about that, but they're still accommodated here, but just in a limited fashion. And so similarly in European cities, there's an issue of supply and demand. You only have so much space that can be dedicated towards cars, and so as such you have to charge for parking because there's more demand than there is supply, and you have to find that balance through enforcing paid parking. And that's generally what you see is in these dense areas, you generally have to pay for parking. I'm usually surprised when I don't have to pay for parking when I drive somewhere in the Netherlands or any other European city, because generally because of that density factor and supply and demand, cars generally have to pay for parking. Sometimes you've got these small kind of municipal parking lots with certain restrictions. You can only park for a certain number of hours. You see the blue line here, and this is mainly for guests of residents here, not so much long-term parking. And you can even see it's not a huge parking lot. Again, car parking isn't necessarily a priority when designing these residential spaces. This blue disc is so important for many parking situations, not just in the Netherlands, but many places across Europe require this sort of disc to be displayed in the dashboard. And how it works is you set the time that you arrive, and that way when a parking attendant comes up and takes a look, they can see what time you arrived, and depending on the hour restriction of that place, they know how long you've been there and whether you're violating the restriction or not. So very simple method, very effective method for enforcing parking. So history, land use, and density generally drive a lot of the changes as it relates to car parking in places like the Netherlands and European cities. On the flip side, many places in North America were designed after the car, and as such were designed around the car. Many people tend to own cars in North America and get around by car, and so it's kind of built on each other over the past years where more people have cars, there needs to be more space for cars, more free parking, big suburbs where people can drive to their houses and park their cars in the garage and in their driveway. So the entire design of North America really revolves around the car, and that's a really key difference that creates a lot of these differences in the way parking is perceived. I would argue that in North America, many people believe that car parking, and free car parking especially, is a right, and they expect to have free parking wherever they drive to. But in places like the Netherlands, I generally expect to pay for parking because it is a luxury and because going somewhere by car is not the only means of getting somewhere. So parking is nice to have, and you generally have to pay for it, whereas in North America, it tends to be free more often than not, and people expect it to be free. So this desire and drive to have free parking pretty much anywhere you go leads to something called parking minimums in North America. And that means that pretty much any new construction that exists has to have a certain number of minimum parking spaces. But parking minimums definitely have a cost associated with it that people don't realize. There is a cost to free parking. And Vox did a great video on this, which I'll link to in the description below. But basically, land is free for cars, but yet there's a shortage of land for residential purposes. And that's one of the reasons that here in Europe, you see that you pretty much have to pay for parking in most places that you go, because that usage of land is so critical. It is absolutely pouring outside, so I've had to come into the car to finish the rest of this video. One of the things I've changed my thinking around is I expect to pay for parking when I go somewhere that I choose to drive to, especially if there's other means to get there. As an example, I recently drove to the city center of Delft, and Delft is one of the cities that's implementing a new paid parking system. So normally when you drive to a city center in the Netherlands or any other European city, you usually have pay machines that you pay to park a fixed hourly fee for. Now in the city of Delft and some other cities around the Netherlands, they're implementing day passes, which means whether you're there for 5 minutes or 5 hours, you pay a fixed fee to park in the city center. In the case of Delft, you can see the example here. It was about 30 euros to park for whatever period of time up to 1 day in the city center. So parking is definitely a luxury, especially in places where space is limited and cars are being deprioritized. You should expect to pay for parking in these places. What I've grown to like and appreciate are places that integrate parking into smart, space, economical solutions. So I'm going to show a couple examples here, but there's places where you of course park underground, and it's a shopping facility, for example, where you can park for 90 minutes for free. And you have a ticket when you come in, and you put that ticket in when you go out, or it recognizes your license plate, and you don't pay to park there, and you can do your shopping and everything you need to do within 90 minutes. If you go over that time, then you pay a small fee. That space is underground, incorporated into the same footprint as the building, which is really nice. Here's a good example of smart use of space and free parking for a store. So Hornbach is a hardware store similar to Home Depot, huge hardware store, and it's actually situated above this parking, and they have free parking underneath for all of the customers that come here. So this is a smart use of space. You utilize the same land and you build parking underneath and then the store on top. The other example I've liked that I've seen and I use regularly are places where parking is above the shopping facility. So you can see some examples here where you drive, and again, it's free for a certain period of time while you do your shopping. You drive and you can park on top of the roof of the store actually, and do your shopping, take your shopping to your car, and it's easy and it's free. So I like those solutions where you can still use your car and drive and park for free within a certain period of time, which is nice because it benefits the business, it benefits the people who choose to drive. If you need to do a bigger shopping or something like that where you need the car, it's a win-win solution. And I would really wish to see more of this in North America. Of course, it's not cheap to implement, but as we think about how we utilize spaces and what spaces are prioritized for cars, I think this is a reasonable solution that accommodates both drivers and accommodates, less space usage for free parking and for cars. So I've talked a lot about parking in this video, and you've seen a lot of different examples of parking lots, but what should you take away from this video? Well, a couple key things. One, if you're a driver from North America coming to somewhere like the Netherlands or anywhere else like a European city where parking is a luxury, cars are not prioritized, space is limited, expect to pay for parking. Parking and driving somewhere is a luxury, and you have to pay to use that luxury. So that's one key takeaway that you need to know. Second thing is there's a better way to utilize space. Instead of building large parking lots for free parking, we need to think about how we use our land in North America, and building parking like this where it's multi-use, it's above a building utilizing the same footprint or similar types of setups. Because whether you realize it or not, there is a cost of free parking. So we need to think about how we can do parking lots better in the US and Canada. And I would love to see more implementations like this where there's mixed use and multi-purpose car spaces and shopping and pedestrian spaces. Now, with all of this being said, it doesn't mean I want to drive less or drive to less places. I love driving. I love being able to drive somewhere, even if I have to pay to park there. But I understand that parking is a luxury, and I have a different perspective on it, and that's what I wanted to share. So thank you so much for watching. Please consider liking and subscribing and sharing this video with anybody else who you think might find this information useful. Thanks so much, and see you in the next video.